Over the last few years, I've had automatic filter rollers from Innovitech, Clarity, Red Sea and Refactory, and I'm a huge fan of them, and I've got to the point now where I don't think I'd run a tank without them. However, I've always thought they're quite expensive for what you get, and most of them cost around the £300 mark. And because they're so expensive, this time I've bought myself a Bubble Magus filter roller, which costs just £125. Now in life you do tend to get what you pay for, so in this video I'm going to go over everything you need to know about it, so we can find out together if it's absolute garbage or if it's the underrated bargain of the century we've all been overlooking. Now this video is not sponsored and I bought the filter with my own money, so with all that being said, let's get stuck in. I'm going to start by talking about some of the design features then. There are some design features with this that are really clever and I really like, but there are other things missing that I'm not quite so keen on. So let's start with the good stuff. First off, it's really super compact. This is the small version of course, but it's nice and small. It's rated for tanks up to 300 litres they say, and I think if I had any sump that was 2 feet or less, I would want to use this. I did get my hands on the medium version briefly, but it was quite big, actually really quite big. And I think if you had the medium version, you wouldn't want to have that in a tank, in a sump less than 2 feet. And I think that's probably for a sump up to 3 feet. But the small version is really compact and I appreciate that it won't take up that much space in my sump. The downside of that is that you have to hang it on the back of your sump only, so there's no option for it to be freestanding. It can be freestanding in theory, but it'll sit too low in your sump and there are no adjustable feet. On a lot of these filter rollers, you get adjustable height feet, so you don't have to hang it on the back of the sump. But that's not the case with this. It's hang on the back of the sump or fabricate your own stand for it. Another thing I like is that they've given a bit of thought to cleaning the part that gets most dirty. On any filter roller, the one part that clogs the most and will always get the most dirty is the inlet tube, this bit. So this is the piece, you can see there are slits in there. They're relatively wide, so they shouldn't get clogged too easily, but these over time get clogged with algae that goes down there, or just detritus, or even baby snails that are born. And every now and then you need to give this a bit of a clean, a bit of a blast under the tap. And on some of the filter rollers, it's really difficult to access this. The Clarity, I always find a bit of a faff. Whereas Bubble Magus have thought about this, and you just need to undo a couple of thumb screws and then you can slide it straight out. So I like how easy that is, and they have given some thought to it. The only downside is I don't think this is actually going to work in my sump. I think the gap between where the end of the filter roller is and my glass wall and the end of my sump basically is probably about to there, and that is just probably not quite going to be enough space to remove this. So I either won't be able to remove it at all, or it'll be a bit of a faff doing so. So if you've got a small sump, you won't get the benefit of this, but if you've got a slightly larger sump, you will get the benefit of being able to clean this easily. And the only thing I would say is make sure when you put this all back together that you do the thumb screws up gently. Don't over tighten them, because when they're in the sump here, they'll get covered in biofilm and algae and all that sort of stuff and salt water, and they'll be really fiddly to undo if you over tighten them. So just do them nice and gently. It won't let any water leak out the side. Do it nice and gently and you will be fine. Also on the water inlet section, you can see here, there's a little water level sensor, or not a water level sensor, sorry. There's a little water level mark, and that tells you how deep this should be in your sump. So your sump water should be at that point, which means that if you've got quite a deep sump with lots of water in it, you'll need to adjust these, the brackets that hang onto the back of the sump, and you can adjust them up or down. So you can adjust it so it should be sat roughly in the correct height of your sump, and I appreciate that it tells you where the water level should be. The next thing I want to tell you about is the plumbing it comes with. So out of the box, it comes with a short length of PVC pipe here attached to a 90-degree outlet, and you need to attach this length of PVC pipe somehow to your main downflow. Now actually I'm going to be doing that with some hard plumbing, so I've made these bits and I'll cut this to size and I'll get that all set up so it looks nice and neat. But you don't have to do that. You can of course if you want to, but you don't have to do that, because in the box you also get a flexible tube. And this might seem like a minor thing, but actually some of the companies, the bigger companies that sell more expensive filter rollers, don't include something to connect your filter unit to your main downpipe. So I really appreciate that they do this. So if you want to use the stock plumbing, you can just push this little black flexible tube over the white PVC section, and then I think the idea ideally is, as far as Bubble Magus is concerned, this will sit directly under your main downpipe, and you can just cut this to size and attach it to your main downpipe. The reality is that I think in most sumps, you might not be able to have it directly under your downpipe. I have a filter sock section that I can't physically remove. So if I were to use this pipe, I'd have to do something like that and have it at two 90-degree angles. I personally wouldn't want to do that because when you have it at that angle, this part over here is going to be pulling on your downpipe, which means it's going to be at a slight angle, and I never like having anything pulling on my downpipe.
That's what she said.
Because you can run the risk of opening up small gaps where you get water leaking out of. But anyway, it's a really good option, and I love that they include plumbing straight out of the box. I do have one small criticism in terms of the plumbing, although it's really an unfair criticism, and that is that I would like to see a union included with this, because if you want to attach it to your downpipe with hard plumbing like I do, then the problem you're going to have is if you fix it on like that, you can never remove this thing from your sump. It's completely locked in and you just can't take it out. And I would love to see a union valve. That's what I'm going to be putting in, a union coupler. So then that just connects to your main downpipe, and all you need to do to remove, if you need to take the filter roller out of your sump for whatever reason, and there are reasons you'll want to, I'll come on to later, all you need to do is disconnect the union coupler, and then you can remove this thing and it's no longer connected to your plumbing. So I would have liked to see that included with the unit as standard, but to be fair, this unit is built to a price, it's very cheap, so I wouldn't expect to see it, and adding one of these would eat into their profit margin, probably to an unacceptable level. So instead, what I would recommend is that if you buy a Bubble Magus filter roller and you want to hard plumb it into your tank, you should buy a union coupler, and I will link one in the description. It costs about 3 or 4 quid, so it's an absolute no-brainer. Moving on then to the filter roll change process, and this is the one part of any filter roller that is usually a little bit of a faff. The more expensive ones often have easier mechanisms that make that much easier to do, but this one doesn't have that. Now, I haven't actually changed the roll on this yet, but I have looked at other videos on YouTube, and actually when you get this, it comes flat packed, so you have to put it all together. It only takes about 20-25 minutes, but you have to put it all together, which does mean it gives you an idea of how it's going to work, how all the parts move together, and it's actually basically very similar to the Clarity that I've had before, so I can tell that this is going to be a bit of a faff to change the filter roll. Now, I'll put that with a caveat, because so this is obviously a brand new roll, but when this runs out, if you catch the end of it, it's really easy, because all you will need to do is staple a new roll onto the end of the old roll, and then you can just pull it through, pull the motor through. The staples will then come out this side. Job done. Really easy. So if you manage to spot the point at which the roll runs out, no problem. However, that won't be the case if you don't catch it, and if it pulls all the roll through and the roll ends up halfway in the body and you don't notice that it's running out, then it's going to be a bit of a faff. There are 4 rollers here between the inside of the unit and the outside of the unit that you have to get the filter floss all the way through, and that is going to be a real pain, especially if you have to do it in sump. If you can fit a union coupler, then it will make it a little bit easier because you can pull the whole unit out. That's still going to be a bit of a faff, but it would be slightly easier. You can remove the bottom section actually, which will make that easier as well. But if you get into the realms when you miss the end of the roll and you have to pull the whole thing out, or you have to install a new roll without just being able to staple it on, it is going to be a bit of a faff. So you really want to avoid that if you can. And one of the other things that the fancy filter rollers have is a notification. So they will tell you when your roll is running out, and that means you go down and check, and you then end up checking every day. So you do catch the end of the roll, but this doesn't have any notifications. It's just a motor and a float sensor, that's it. So there's no smart features. It won't tell you when you're running out, and you'll want to keep an eye on your sump. To be fair, I open my sump doors every couple of days anyway, so I don't think that will be a problem for me, but it is something to bear in mind. The other part on any filter roller that is a faff when it comes to changing the roll is getting the old used roll off. Now, actually, on even the most expensive ones, that's mostly a bit of a faff. Clarity have got a good method of getting it off, and it's very easy, but the others, actually, it can be a little bit fiddly. This, though, unfortunately, it looks like it's going to be a little bit more fiddly. So what you have to do is loosen the thumb screws on the motor itself. So you actually have to take the motor off. There we go. And then you can pop that off. So then the motor, you'll have to dangle out the side of your sump somewhere, which isn't ideal. But you have to take the whole motor off, and then you need to pop these 2 plastic bits off. You just pull them aside, and then you can dispose of it. To be fair, the only thing about that I don't like is that you have to take the motor off, which is a bit of a faff. And these thumb screws, I'm amazed I did it first time. I've tried this a few times. The thumb screws are really tight and they're a bit of a pain in the backside. So it is going to be a bit of a faff when you have to take the old roll off. Not a big deal, but it is worth mentioning. And the one thing that I give Bubble Magus credit for here is that when you get a new roll, with every new roll, it comes with a new piece of cardboard that you fit in here that grips the end of the roll, and it's got a bit of sticky back plastic on it, so you can just peel the cover off, stick the roll to that, and then it will grip and put it all through. So it's not all bad when it comes to removing the old roll, but it does look like it'll be a little bit of a faff, but not too bad. In terms of design features then, that is all I need to tell you, so now let's go and get it installed. As you can see then, the filter roller is now installed, and actually plumbing it was pretty easy. You just need to use 32mm piping and make sure you measure it very carefully before you cut it. And in fact, the only thing I think I got wrong was that I put the union on the upright pipe rather than the pipe going across, which means it's a little bit more difficult to access, but nonetheless, it will still mean that I can remove the whole thing if I need to. And now it's in place, although it does take up quite a lot of space in my tiny little sump, it still feels really compact. It doesn't go up too high, so it doesn't take up too much vertical space, and it still leaves me plenty of space for other stuff in the sump, which is absolutely fantastic. Now, unfortunately, as I suspected, I'm not going to have enough space to remove the inlet tube because the end of the filter roller is too close to the wall of my sump, so if I do ever want to clean that, I'll have to pull the whole thing out and take it apart out of the sump. But apart from that, I don't have any real complaints. It did take me a couple of days to dial it in properly, and I found that I was getting air bubbles within the filter roller itself, but all that meant was that I hadn't quite seated the plumbing properly, and it was pulling air in at the 90-degree bends. So I just straightened up the plumbing a tiny bit, and that fixed the problem. And it actually also took me a couple of days to get the water level sensor right. At first I tried to have it as high as possible, but I found that the motor just wasn't turning at all, and water just simply leaked out of the side of the filter roller, where there are some very small holes. To fix that though, all I needed to do was lower the water level sensor, and I lowered it by about 10 to 15mm, and now it worked absolutely fantastic. The motor is super quiet when it turns, and the roll is already going a nice brown colour, so I can see it's doing its job. Now, it's really hard to compare the performance of this against my other filter rollers, because in order to do so, really I'd need to set up two in the same tank. So I can't properly confirm how it gets on in terms of performance, but I'm very happy with it. My water looks nice and clear, and it's obvious that it's removing nutrients and uneaten food from my water column, which is what I want it to do. And now we can head back up to Future Alex for an overall summary. So fast forward then, and I have now had the filter roller installed for just over a week, so I can summarise how I've got on with it and give you my final thoughts, and I can answer the question I posed in the title: does the cheap automatic filter roller suck? Well, first things first, there's no two ways about it. The alternative filter rollers from the main brands that are more expensive are objectively better than the Bubble Magus. They have clever features including media trays, easy roll change mechanisms, and easy inlet filter maintenance mechanisms. And on top of that, the Red Sea and Refactory ones have an app, so it gives you data as to how much roll you're using, and it reminds you when your roll is about to run out. With all that being said, as a pure filter roller, the Bubble Magus is doing a really good job. And I have to say that if you're on a budget, I wouldn't hesitate to recommend it. And in fact, even if you're not on a budget, if you don't think the extra features are worth the extra money, I have no problem recommending the Bubble Magus. It's quiet, it's compact, and ultimately it removes nutrients from the water column and helps keep your tank clear, which is really the reason you buy an automatic filter roller in the first place. Now, I will come back and do a long-term update. I won't do a separate video, but in about 6 months' time or so, I'll do a pinned comment telling you how I've got on with it over time, so make sure you check back for that. And if you enjoyed the video, give me a thumbs up and subscribe for next time, and until then, happy reefing.